Honourable Kilian.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, Deputy President, Ministers, colleagues, and the Speaker, who is today having his opportunity to speak. First of all, Madam Deputy Speaker, COPE wants to add our voice to those of other parties to wish our former beloved President Nelson Mandela all of the best for a speedy recovery. The nation is praying that he should recover soon. Our debate today about Vote 2 Parliament takes place, Deputy Speaker, at a time when the fourth Parliament is essentially wrapping up its business in preparation for the milestone election of 2014 to celebrate 20 years of democracy in South Africa. It is therefore appropriate for us to assess the role of Parliament and its impact on and relevance in the national discourse. The primary role of Parliament is to pass legislation and to hold executive organs of state and the executive as government accountable. This is its scrutiny role, which makes all parliaments relevant or not. Chairperson, when a respectable columnist like Max de Pree says, Parliament is rendered an irrelevant institution, we should all sit up. In a recent article, he said, we were almost back in the 1980s when extra-parliamentary politics was more in touch with the nation than Parliament under P.W. Botha. He reminded us that on occasion of the resignation of the Honourable Dr. Van Zyl Slabbert, now late, called Parliament at that stage a talk shop, a sideshow with little influence over P.W. Botha, his cabinet and his State Security Council. Parliament to them was an unavoidable nuisance. Unfortunately, de Pree now compares this fourth Parliament, or Parliament as an institution, to the one of the 1980s, when the real centre of power was not in Parliament. According to de Pree, and I quote, the real action now is at Luthuli House, Kusatu House, the SACP headquarters, Nkandla, and the Gupta compound in Saxonwold, close quote. But, Deputy Speaker, today we have a People's Parliament representing all South Africans. Today the Constitution prescribes how Parliament should conduct its business. It is in Parliament where we should continue the struggle for the inclusion of all marginalized citizens, those who still have not tasted the fruits of our democracy after our oppressive past, those who remain marginalized because they are indeed not politically connected to the ruling elite. This Parliament is where we should keep government accountable and where we should receive information held by government to scrutinize executive action, or the lack thereof. We also need to debate issues of grave national importance, such as threats to our national pride, the country's security, and our sovereignty, where we should legislate to close legislative gaps which make it possible for corrupt politicians and public servants to enrich themselves with taxpayers' money, and they do so with impunity at the expense of the poor. Do we really have such a Parliament? Is the question we need to answer today. Unfortunately, Deputy Speaker, we don't. Despite the gallant efforts of Speaker Sisulu and others to build the credibility of this institution and to make Parliament a constitutional institution with the values as enshrined in the Constitution, we have serious challenges. Not the least being a growing perception that the ANC and consequently the executive treats Parliament with contempt. In fact, it seems like de Pre is correct when he states that the ANC seems hell-bent upon rendering Parliament an irrelevant institution, to turn us into a rubber stamp of the executive. Just last year, the motion of no confidence compelled opposition parties to approach the High Court. And during the same year, Mr. Mario Ambrosini, whom we wish a speedy recovery, had to approach the Constitutional Court to compel Parliament to change its rules. And when rulings by previous speakers to limit privileged provisions of the Constitution, freedom of speech, was taken on review. We did that, and we will not apologize for that. Clearly, the ANC regard these actions as obstructive, as we have also listened to the Deputy Chief Whip of the ANC. But such legal challenges to the rules, rulings, and practices of Parliament are crucial to develop jurisprudence and to test our practices against the provisions of the Constitution. COPE has sympathy with Honourable Speaker, and we had that particularly during the tug of war on the motion of no confidence, if and when it should be debated. It was unfortunate that the ANC Chief Whip hauled him before the ANC caucus in full view of the nation. That beckons the question if the Constitution should not be revised to provide for a Speaker who resigns from his or her party position and membership for the duration of his or her office. The appropriate party could then fill that seat from its parliamentary list. It does not promote a comprehensive participatory democracy if the Speaker is dragged into politics. We as COPE would like to suggest that we really reconsider the role of Speaker and his affiliation to party politics. He should be able to apply the rules without fear or favour. We commend efforts by the Speaker to remind the Executive about outstanding questions that have remained unanswered. But, Chairperson, whereas administrative capacity is often quoted as a reason why questions are not answered in time, several ministers show their blatant disdain for members, particularly of opposition parties, during oral question sessions in Parliament. And clearly that attitude permeates through their offices. And that possibly explains why the large number of unanswered questions are actually mainly opposition questions. In contradiction to that, ANC MP questions are answered clearly, very specifically within reasonable time. And actually, Deputy Speaker, we have done an analysis. We can prove that. That is exactly what is happening. A comparative analysis of unanswered questions supports this view, and we are prepared to discuss it with the Deputy President soon. Honourable Deputy Speaker, Parliament this year will receive close to a historic 2 billion rand. Whereas COPE salutes the presiding officers for their commitment to enhancing the role of Parliament and to capacitating members serving in this institution, we are warning that throwing more money at the institution will not in itself improve the operations of this Parliament and will not enhance constitutional oversight over the executive. We've grown a bigger and bigger bureaucracy, but efficiencies in Parliament has not improved commensurate to the additional posts created, despite additional support staff to committees. Committee chairpersons and members are still correcting minutes. It is happening daily. It appears that staff are not trained to understand the holy grail of the separation of powers. In fact, when they keep minutes, they often list the apologies of ministers and deputy ministers amongst members of the committees. Clearly, that is a very serious oversight. After almost 20 years into our democracy, there can be no excuse for that. Furthermore, the different roles and responsibilities of committee staff needs to be clarified. Some committees now have content advisors in addition to secretarial support and researchers. But despite that, our limited number of legal advisors are often burdened with the correction of minutes. This can't be a sound situation, Speaker. We need to look at how we are recruiting people to serve in those positions in committees. We need to make sure that they are managed appropriately. This is a serious management issue and needs to be addressed very urgently. During last year's debate, we raised concerns about the limited number of legal advisors to Parliament. They numbered 9 then, they are now 10. In addition to that, yes, we thank the Speaker for establishing the legal drafting unit. We have 4 legal drafters there and 2 more will be appointed. But the question is that enough? If legislation and passing of bills is our primary role, in addition to executive oversight, the number of bills passed so far by this Parliament equals 98. And in comparison to those passed by the third Parliament, we are lagging behind. The third Parliament passed altogether 200 bills. But interestingly enough, during the last year of the third Parliament, 77 bills were passed. If we have such a repeat of that situation before the election in 2014, Parliament and the legal advisors will not be able to cope. It is as simple as that. This is a people's parliament, Deputy Speaker. We are elected to represent the voters who mandated us to represent their needs and their interests. We are not supposed to be legal eagles who understand the intricate wiring of legislation and how different acts impact on draft legislation before committees. We do our best, but our best is often not enough. That is where the research capacity
your time is up now.
And professional legal advisors have to guide committee members. Thank you.
Thank you very much.